Okay, welcome, everybody. We're going to start out with that quick video here. We'll get to Quizlet Live here in a moment, but not yet. And we're going to spend a bulk of today dealing with that Unit 6 document. Now, 12 weeks to a trimester. Yes? Everybody understand that? 12 weeks to a trimester. We are currently on week 4. Got me? We spent the first 3 weeks dealing with the legislative branch. We're going to be on to the executive branch here in week 4. We're going to be spending 2 weeks on the executive branch. Okay? 2 weeks on the executive branch. So the last unit was Unit 5. We're currently on Unit 6. When is the folder for Unit 5 going to close? When we get to Unit 7. Important for you to understand that you only have until this unit is done to turn in anything from Unit 5. Are we good there? So don't be surprised when the Unit 5 stuff, when the legislative branch folder just simply goes away. So you've got 2 weeks to do that. Now, you might ask yourself, well, wait a minute. We've got week 4 this week. Is week 5 next week? No, I'm not counting that week because we have spring break. Okay, so we're going to have another week when we come back, when we return from break. Then we will finish at the end of that week, not just with the executive branch, but anything legislative will be closing in that folder. So you're going to want to make sure that you get that stuff in. Are we good? Cool. Okay. I think I have the grade book all but updated. Okay. I like to stay on top of that grade book and make sure that everything is up to date for you, so you guys know exactly where we are or where you stand in Infant Campus. That should be a very up-to-date grade for you as we currently are. Only 2 things that are in there right now: your Unit 5 document and your Unit 5 assessment. So make sure that you have those 2 things done before the end of week 5. Good? Easy enough? All right. So that is where we are, folks. We're going to get going on Rachel Carson here in a moment, but not yet. Give me just a minute to pull up that video. We'll watch that, and then we'll be on to the next thing. Here we go.
Okay, the mama falcon was last spotted. Bald eagle? No way. Whoa. Dear Tim and Moby, I know what Indian summer is, but what is a silent spring? From Rohan. Silent Spring isn't about the weather or seasons. It's a book published in 1962 by the science writer Rachel Carson. In it, she shared concerns about the dangers of industrial chemicals. But its impact was much broader than that. Silent Spring raised an alarm about our fragile environment and helped kickstart a worldwide push to protect our water, air, and land. Rachel Carson was born in 1907 in Springdale, Pennsylvania. As a child, she was a bit of a loner. She loved exploring nearby forests and streams. She wrote stories about animals and even had a few published. Carson fed her interest by focusing on marine biology in college. She earned a master's degree in zoology, the study of animal biology. But instead of working in the lab, Carson blazed a new career path. She became one of the earliest science communicators. She simplified complex ideas so all people could understand them. Just like Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, those Mythbusters guys. Oh, right. And us, I guess. Carson's first job was writing for a radio series, Romance Under the Waters. These short segments on marine life were wildly popular. She went on to publish her Sea Trilogy, 3 best-selling books about the ocean. They provided an in-depth view of the world beneath the waves. Carson hoped to inspire a protective feeling toward the environment and raise a warning about the damage new technologies were doing to it. She was especially concerned about a gas called DDT. That stands for, this word. It's a powerful pesticide used to kill insects like lice and mosquitoes. During World War II, the military sprayed it on soldiers to fight diseases. It killed bugs that often carry deadly germs. In the years after the war, farmers began using DDT on crops. Yeah, it worked on all kinds of pests. It didn't break down easily or wash away when it rained, so you didn't have to apply it over and over again. Soon, it was being used around the world, and not just for agriculture. People sprayed it in their homes to get rid of bugs. Hospitals disinfected their wards with it. And millions of healthy people were sprayed to prevent outbreaks. Malaria was nearly eradicated. Some countries saw their cases drop from the millions to single digits. DDT became a symbol of scientific progress. Humanity was taming nature and making the world a safer place. But Carson saw one minor problem with this picture. How could such a lethal poison be safe for widespread use? She investigated further and found a frightening scene in the Midwest. Michigan State University used DDT to combat Dutch elm disease. That's a tree-killing fungus carried by beetles. It had been sweeping across America for years, ravaging cities. The university sprayed DDT everywhere to protect the landscape. Within a few years, the campus looked the same, but sounded a lot different. The trees were saved and the beetles were gone, but so were all the robins. Not a single chirping redbreast could be found across the campus. It was a somber and eerily silent spring. People never stopped to think how DDT might affect the food chain. The pesticide remained in the water and soil for decades. Earthworms eating dead leaves would build up DDT in their systems, and robins would eat dozens of worms every day. It was a case of biomagnification. Animals higher in the food chain accumulated more of the poison. Things that were safe at low doses could build up to deadly levels. Scientists had been aware of these problems for years, but nothing was being done. Carson knew she had to make regular folks understand the danger they were in. So she began Silent Spring with A Fable for Tomorrow.
There once was a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across a backdrop of pines. Then a strange blight crept over the area, and everything began to change. Mysterious maladies swept the flocks of chickens. The cattle and sheep sickened and died. Everywhere was a shadow of death. The people had done it themselves.
Yeah, Carson knew how to grab your attention. With such a dire vision of the future, Silent Spring made environmental protection into a moral issue about right versus wrong. She hoped readers would take responsibility and demand change. Well, chemical companies weren't going to sit still for that. If Carson's ideas took hold, it would cost them billions. So they launched sexist smear campaigns, insulting Carson just for being a woman. They questioned why she wasn't married and called her a crazy cat lady. Some even labeled her a spy, out to disrupt the American food supply. Yeah, you know you're desperate when you have to target a person instead of their ideas. But the attacks were ineffective. Within a year of her book's publication, Carson was testifying before Congress. She was in the middle of an exhausting battle with cancer. But she spoke with clarity and conviction, arguing for strict regulations on chemicals like DDT. It was her final public appearance. Within a year, new laws were being passed to safeguard our air, water, and land. The Environmental Protection Agency was created to enforce them. Meanwhile, studies confirmed that DDT weakened the shells of many bird species. Their young would die before they even hatched. So, in 1972, DDT was banned for general use in the United States. That led to a comeback in bald eagle and peregrine falcon populations. Yep, and Silent Spring's reach extended beyond that. It changed how we think about our relationship to the planet. Carson reminded us that we are not outside the natural world. In one television interview, she said,
Man's endeavors to control nature by his powers to alter and destroy the world inevitably evolve into a war against himself, a war he would lose unless he came to terms with nature.
Let's all go to Quizlet.live right now. Put the code up there in just a sec. There is your code, my dudes. 964. The executive branch. Wow. Remember, not Quizlet.com, but Quizlet.live. Quizlet.live. Pretty good. Cool. Good. All right. Here we go. 3 rounds. Here are your spirit animals, folks, and they're racing. Here we go, round 2. And they're racing. This is it, folks. This one's for all the Tostitos. And they're racing. Awesome, awesome, awesome job. All right. Would everybody for me go to Schoology, click on the executive branch. Click on the executive branch for me, please. All right, so here's what it should look like in your world. So you've got two available folders now. Under the executive branch, this is where you'll find the vocab if you want to brush up on some of the terms. And obviously we do that every day in class. But under the Unit 6 document, here's what we got. This one right here, Hybrid Civics, Unit 6. Go ahead and open that one up right now. And let's put that one into Notability. Put that one into Notability. Okay, so I'm just printing a copy of this for a student that doesn't have an iPad today. So this is what we're going to start out on, okay, right here. Do now watch the video, should we have a president, okay? Should we have a president? What I want you to kind of ask yourself before we even get into this thing is, I want you to think, let me see your eyes right now, okay, because this is kind of an important question, okay? Think of how much time and energy we spend dealing with the elections. I mean, think about how many times you've seen election coverage on the news. Think about how much you've seen advertisements for elections. And what do they really do? I mean, could you explain to me right now everything that the president does? It's kind of hard to, it's hard to make something tangible, isn't it? It's kind of hard to explain. Okay. I mean, you know that they have veto power and you know that they make, speeches and you do all those things. That's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Okay, and what this first person is going to talk about on this very video that I kind of want you to just take in. Okay, I don't even want you to have to actually. Okay, we're going to answer these questions as a class afterward together, but I want you to kind of take it all in and try to get a sense for, well, what are we really doing here? Why do we have a president? Is their job really that important, and does it really represent democracy? I mean, it is democracy in a sense. I mean, what is your definition of democracy? Where everybody gets to participate in government? Well, then why do we need a leader? I mean, if it's just a figurehead, what is the point? Okay, so I'm not saying that we should just get rid of it altogether. This is more just an exploration of what is the president's job? What do they do? Is it really necessary? Does it represent democracy? Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to get right to this one here. I'm going to mute myself.
Should we have a president? I'm not entirely sure.
I think it's very important to have a president, somebody that can lead the country.
Presidential democracies don't work.
We have a system of checks and balances with the three branches of government.
And I think knowing better, we wouldn't pick a presidential democracy.
In America, we spend a staggering amount of time talking about the president, and it might be a terrible idea. This isn't just a comment about our current president. This is a comment about all presidents, because we all know how the country works today. No matter who's in the White House, half of the country thinks that the world is going to end, and we act like it. So, is this rational? Or maybe, are we letting our brains get hacked? Would you say the symbolism of the presidency, when it was created, has it changed to what it is now?
Certainly the focus on the presidency is way more intense than was ever imagined.
Presidents may take credit for the success of our economy, our schools, and everything else, but there's not a lot of evidence they deserve it. And yet we spend at a minimum 1 year out of every 4 arguing about who should be president. And then we spend at least the next 3 years arguing about what they're doing once they get there. If you made a pie chart of our collective civic brain, a huge slice would be spent on selecting and arguing about our head of state. But if you made another pie chart of all the elected officials who influence our lives, the president would barely register. What is the impact of local politics on our immediate community compared to the presidency?
The presidency gets a lot of national media attention, but in terms of the fabric of our lives, we're usually living with the policies and decisions of local and state government.
One of the things that makes America really unique is the separation of powers. And I don't mean just between the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. We have regional separations between states, counties, cities, townships, school districts.
We get a lot of federal dollars for transportation in Minnesota, but Minnesota has to decide how those dollars are going to be spent. What roads are we going to pave? What bridges are we going to fix? What transit are we going to invest in? So I think if you stop at the federal level, you say, I want you to decide what's going to come to the state, but I don't want to have any say in how that's going to be rolled out in my state or how that's going to be implemented here.
Forget Washington. In America, we have governors, state representatives, county commissioners, mayors, and school boards, literally thousands and thousands of elected officials who get to decide what our school systems look like, what happens if we get arrested, and even where we can build our garages.
The most day-to-day things that impact your life are decisions that are made by our locally elected officials. So our education system is overwhelmingly decided at the state level. How we set things up, how businesses are invested in, that's really at your state and your county and then at your city level.
These are all people we get to vote for. But how much time do we spend thinking about them? Compared to the president, it's not even close.
270 to be elected president of the United States.
What we do know is
right now. Okay, take a look at your sheet that's in front of you. Okay, very first question. Okay, why might we be focusing too much on the presidency and national government? Yeah.
Because the news talks about them.
It does. It does. The news talks about it all the time. Okay, and is that a good representation of things that impact your life? Not necessarily. I would argue that exponentially more. Okay. You are exponentially more impacted on a local level than you are on a federal level. So I hate to break it to you, but whoever becomes president isn't going to really impact your life all that much relative to who is your mayor or who is going to be your governor. You guys see what I'm saying? Yes? I mean, even look at the pandemic. How much control about Minnesota did the president really have? None. Who had more power with that? The governor. You guys see what I'm saying? Okay. So, I mean, I'm not just saying this from a COVID standpoint. I'm saying this from a policy standpoint, that things that are going to impact your life, much more impactful on the local level. Okay. So that might be a good answer for number one. Okay. Very good. We're going to get right back to it here.
Is that politically speaking, the presidency controls our brains. And you can track this through media analytics. The number of times we mention the president and the minutes we spend debating his or her actions. In this sense, the brain space, the president is hugely influential because for many of us, it's the only elected office we hear about in the news.
The White House releasing copies of President Obama's original long-form birth certificate.
The administration is ramping up a battle on the economic front.
Marriage, he was upset because he dented the Clinton brand again.
You know, we all have the same president, right? So it's a little bit easier for national media to cover something we all share. But the things that impact day-to-day lives, those decisions are made by locally elected officials.
Unfortunately, a lot of local races, there's not a lot of money that is put into them. And so a lot of mayors have other jobs, they have families. A lot of those local officials don't have the capacity, like a national election, to spend money to get, voting cards out and get commercial ads out and things like that. And so what ends up happening is that unless they are able to go to every door, people might not even know there's a race going on.
So what can we do as the media to alleviate this problem?
The work ahead is changing the media focus. And, you know, I've talked to plenty of reporters and editors, and what they say is, hey, we're innocent here. We're going where the customer, the audience member wants to see. It's going to take a big movement of people in communities saying, hey, we take these issues that are being decided here in our neighborhood seriously. We're showing up for elections. We're going to hold our officials accountable, and we expect the media to give presidential attention to local issues.
So let's just ask the question. What would happen if we got rid of the presidency altogether?
I think we should have a president because they are the commander-in-chief.
I think there needs to be leadership in the executive branch.
I think it's easier for the nation to look towards one leader.
Now, we'd obviously be giving up on a lot of our story. I mean, the symbolism of the presidency is as American as it gets. It's the song, it's the money, it's what school kids say they want to be. But if we're being honest, we'd also be freeing up a lot of cognitive horsepower in the news, in our social media, even in our private dinner conversations. And the argument can be made that if we spent all this mental real estate on other issues, well, we'd probably be a lot less frustrated with our schools, our prisons, and our garages.
You know, when we look at the issues that are so divisive in the national media, we get an opportunity at a local and state level to engage in conversations that are more personal, more one-on-one. If you are passionate about a topic and you want to engage, that's where you're going to make, I think, the biggest impact and the biggest difference is by talking to your neighbors and your locally elected officials.
Now, to be fair, we probably want to maintain the checks and balances within our federal government. But what alternatives to a president are out there?
You travel to Europe and you're going to see parliamentary system in which the power is in the legislative branch. The legislative branch decides to select who's going to be in the cabinet and who will be kind of the prime minister of that cabinet, who then becomes the symbolic leader. But in terms of power, the prime minister is one among equal in the cabinet.
Maybe our president could be a group of randomly selected citizens. Maybe it could be the governor of a state, each one serving a one-month term. Or maybe it could be something like those Vulcan councils you see on Star Trek. Some of these other possibilities would prevent us from arguing endlessly over a personality we don't really control, and a personality that arguably doesn't control us.
There's no doubt that the president cast a large and dark shadow over what is going on in America. And certainly the issues that come up in local politics, one of the reasons that citizens may not be giving as much attention to what the local decision making is because they assume that it's being taken care of somewhere else.
Okay, I totally understand that right now, as you're watching this or listening to this, you may feel a little bit angry or ticked off, and that's totally understandable. I mean, to ask the question, do we even need a presidency? Yeah, it might be a little enraging, but that's one of the great things about this country, that we can even ask that question. Look, we've just shown you evidence that we spend an unbalanced amount of attention on the presidency. The question is, how do we fill the greater space of politics? Think about your local politics and how it affects your immediate life. How do you feel about that? What do you think? Hey everybody, this is Toussaint Morrison. In our next episode,
right beneath that little area, it says 6.1 notes. You guys see that part? We skim those little questions for you because I'm going to be showing you those because you know what? I'm just going to be giving you answers today because that's just the kind of guy I am. I'm here for the kids. And the paycheck. Teaching is very lucrative, by the way. You want to get into a business where you can make money hand over fist? Get into teaching. No? You guys don't agree with that? No? Okay. Well, whatever. Suit yourself. All right, here we go. Let's go right on to the next slide right here. That's not what I wanted. There we go. The main job of the executive branch, folks, the main job of the executive branch, when you compare it with the legislative branch, do you guys remember what the answer for this one was for the legislative branch? The legislative branch does what? Yeah. Very good. Makes the laws. The executive branch carries them out. sees them happen, okay? Good, is to carry out the country's laws. Now, when we think of the executive branch, a lot of people will just kind of assume it's synonymous with the presidency, and that's not incorrect, okay? That is not incorrect. Oh, I forgot to present for our people online. My bad. Here we go. What qualifications? Oh, before I forget, if you need to access this, do you all know how to access the Try3 Google presentation? Yes? Everybody sees that little link on Schoology, yeah? Okay. This is tied right to that presentation, so if you ever need to look this stuff up, this is where it is. Qualifications to be president of the United States: one needs to be a United States-born citizen of at least 35 years of age and a resident of the U.S. for at least 14 years. A resident of the United States for at least 14 years. Term limits. Let me tell you a quick little story about term limits. As you guys probably well know, our first president, George Washington, was president for how many terms? 2. And that was kind of the precedent on the presidency going forward. It was an unwritten rule for a number of years that it's your duty as president to walk away after the second one. Seriously, it's your job to walk away after the second one. In fact, little known fact for you here, folks. Did you know that Congress offered George Washington a crown and said, "Be our king"? And do you know what he did? Yeah, he said no. Think of that. Think of that renunciation of power. That's amazing. It's like a new definition of power, to walk away. And I would argue that's why we take that so seriously. We take the renunciation of power after that second term pretty seriously. Okay. Now, anywho, we rolled through all of these presidents here until we got to a guy by the name of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You guys know who that is? Yes? You guys know how many terms he served? He was actually elected for a 4th too. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, elected for the 4th, died, so he didn't get to carry it out. But that guy was president for a long time, long time. I mean, started the Great Depression right through into almost the end of World War II. Okay, was president for a long time. Changed the entire scope of the government. So whether you are a Franklin Delano Roosevelt fan or not, you would argue that he's the reason why we have a 22nd Amendment, which makes that now a hard and fast rule that you're allowed to have 2 terms as president. That's it. Does that make sense? Okay. Regardless of where you lie on the political spectrum, it's kind of hard to argue with the fact that the reason that we have that hard and fast rule now is because, you know, if we truly want to prevent, you know, a tyranny or whatever that might be, probably a good idea to have that hard and fast rule that you get 2 terms. That's it. Okay. So, presidential succession. How does that work? Well, here's your order of operations here, folks. It goes to the vice president, then to the Speaker of the House, then President pro tempore. You guys remember that from the legislative branch? Yes? Good. Remember how those are elected? It's kind of interesting that we even bring that up, though, folks, because we have a couple of different scenarios in which for example, like, do you know that if you were to look like right over here, Gerald Ford, okay? Gerald Ford was appointed to the position of vice president, and he took over because what did that guy do? What did Nixon do? Nobody knows? He resigned before his impeachment process. So Gerald Ford became president without ever getting voted into the position. Isn't that interesting? So he was appointed because Nixon had to replace Spiro Agnew, okay? And now you've got Gerald Ford and he becomes president of the nation, okay? Without ever getting elected to the position. Isn't that kind of interesting? And this is the reason why we have that, okay? why we have the order of operations of who goes where. Okay, so if the vice president, if you have a vacancy, it's filled by the president. Okay, pretty powerful power there, I would argue. Yes, and that's an example of it right there with Nixon and Ford. Okay, VP can assume presidential duties if the president is unable to perform the job because of an illness, or they're just not available for that situation. Got me? Vice president steps in. Everybody got this? Okay. Look at all the jobs the president has, not just a figurehead. Okay. Not just commander-in-chief. Okay. But chief executive or administrator. They're responsible for executing, carrying out the laws passed by Congress. Okay. That's basically synonymous with what the executive branch is. Commander-in-chief, head of the U.S. Armed Forces. So he's got on his cabinet, he's also got the chief of staff. Okay. The chiefs of staff, he brings in the general of the army, he brings in the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Marines, and he's in charge of all those people. Okay. The president gives an order to those people, they need to follow it because he is chief of staff. A chief legislator. Now, we don't necessarily think of the president as being involved in the legislative branch, but if you want to get real technical, okay, they recommend, suggest, or need the needed laws to Congress. Hey, I can't pass laws as a president, but I can recommend ones that you should, or recommend laws that maybe we should take away. Okay, chief of state, symbol of the U.S. and its people. A chief diplomat. This person is also responsible for our relations with other countries. Okay. We're just having a conversation with one of our students that was really struggling, trying to understand what the United States role in the world is. That's just U.S. foreign policy. How do we deal with other countries? Okay. Party leader. It's the assumption that if you are the president, you aren't just all of these things, but you're also still in charge of that party. So if you're a Democrat, you're in charge of the Democratic Party. If you're a Republican, you're in charge of that Republican Party. Okay. And there's a lot that comes with that. Like, how are you going to raise money for your constituents? How are you going to raise money for, if you want to see a senator fill a seat somewhere? Okay. And then also chief citizen, represents all citizens and sets an example for civic behavior. Okay. There's supposed to be like somebody that we look to for how one is supposed to behave. If you don't have this done, don't freak out. I'll come back to it. I promise, okay? But I'm just going to go to the next one because I see we have some people that are done. Okay? There's only I think it's 5 or 6 words on this page that you have to know, okay? Here we go. What are the duties of the vice president? You guys remember this from the legislative branch. You know that the vice president presides over the Senate and kind of just confirms that electoral vote as it comes in. This came up in the news recently. January 6th, right? Okay. When the president at that time basically said to his vice president, are you going to confirm that electorate? Are you going to confirm that electoral ballot? And then you guys know what ensued. Executive departments that advise the president, sometimes called the president's cabinet, and those cabinet members are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. So it's not like, President Biden could have walked into his office, okay, and said, here are my cabinet members, make it happen. They still need to be approved by the Senate. Good? Good. Questions about this slide? This one's easy, right? I'm going to go back to the previous one because I promised I would. Get that written down. Okay.